Green Day's story is not just about a band becoming famous. It is about a noisy, fast, sarcastic form of punk rock breaking through at exactly the right cultural moment. Formed in Rodeo, California, in 1987, Green Day began as a teenage project built around short songs, restless energy, and a sharp sense of alienation. At a time when mainstream rock was still dominated by arena-sized seriousness, Green Day sounded impatient, funny, bratty, and oddly relatable. They would later sell roughly 75 million records worldwide and become one of the defining rock bands of their generation. But the remarkable part is how far they traveled without completely losing the identity that made them matter, three musicians turning everyday boredom, anxiety, and anger into songs that felt instantly memorable. The band began with Billie Joe Armstrong on vocals and guitar and Mike Dirnt on bass and backing vocals. Before they were called Green Day, they performed under the name Sweet Children. That early name captured their youth, but not the attitude that would eventually define them. In 1989, they adopted the name Green Day, and soon became part of the Bay Area punk ecosystem centered around 924 Gilman Street in Berkeley. Gilman was not just a venue, it was a scene with rules, values, and suspicion toward commercial ambition. Bands were expected to be independent, community-minded, and honest. For young musicians, it offered a place where speed, imperfection, and attitude could matter more than polish. Green Day learned how to connect in that environment before the world paid attention. Green Day's first releases came through Lookout Records, an independent label closely tied to the local punk world. Their debut album, 39/Smooth, arrived in 1990 and showed the early version of their sound, fast tempos, catchy melodies, and songs that balanced punk aggression with pop instincts. The band was not trying to sound complicated. Their strength was directness. They wrote songs that could feel messy and youthful, but still stick in your head after one listen. Around this period, the lineup changed in a way that would shape the rest of their career. Drummer John Kiffmeyer left, and Tré Cool joined in 1990. With Billie Joe, Mike Dirnt, and Tré Cool, Green Day became the power trio most fans recognize today. The arrival of Tré Cool helped sharpen Green Day's identity. His drumming brought speed, humor, and explosive momentum, giving the band's simple song structures a more frantic personality. Their second album, Kerplunk, released in 1991, became a crucial bridge between underground credibility and mainstream potential. It still belonged to the independent punk world, but it also showed that Green Day could reach far beyond it. Kerplunk sold impressively for an indie punk release, proving there was a wider audience for their mixture of melody and rebellion. This was the central tension in Green Day's early story. They came from a scene that distrusted major labels, but their songs sounded too immediate and accessible to remain a secret forever. The turning point came when Green Day signed to Reprise Records and released Dookie in 1994. For some punk purists, the move to a major label felt like betrayal. But commercially and culturally, Dookie was a detonation. Its songs captured suburban boredom, panic, laziness, insecurity, and self-mockery with a level of catchiness that made punk feel newly mainstream. The album eventually shipped over 20 million copies in the United States, an astonishing number for a band rooted in underground punk. Dookie did not sound like a cautious crossover attempt. It sounded like three people sprinting through anxiety and turning it into hooks. That is why it resonated. The music was fast and funny, but beneath the jokes was a generation's nervous system. Dookie's success helped reignite mainstream interest in punk rock. Green Day did not invent punk, and they were far from the first punk band to write melodic songs. But they arrived at a moment when alternative music had opened the door for rawer sounds on radio and television. Nirvana had changed what mainstream rock could look like, and Green Day pushed another version of that shift, shorter, brighter, more sarcastic, and more pop-driven. Their breakthrough helped make room for a wave of pop-punk and punk-influenced bands. Just as importantly, they made punk feel less like a museum of old rebellion and more like a living language for young people in the 1990s who felt bored, awkward, and angry. After a massive breakthrough, the hardest question is always what comes next. Green Day followed Dookie with Insomniac in 1995, Nimrod in 1997, and Warning in 2000. None matched Dookie's enormous commercial impact, but that does not mean they failed. Insomniac and Nimrod reached double platinum status, while Warning went gold. More importantly, these records showed a band refusing to simply repeat itself. Insomniac was darker and harsher, almost a reaction against sudden fame. Nimrod expanded their range and proved they could move beyond one formula. Warning leaned into more acoustic and pop-oriented textures. This period is sometimes treated as a decline, but it was also a long experiment in survival after becoming bigger than anyone expected. By the early 2000s, Green Day could have settled into nostalgia. Instead, they made one of the boldest moves of their career, American Idiot, released in 2004. It was a rock opera, a format associated with ambition, theatricality, and risk. The album arrived during a politically charged era and gave younger listeners a dramatic story of frustration, media overload, identity crisis, and disillusionment. Rather than simply returning to the quick-hit punk formula, Green Day built a widescreen album with recurring characters and emotional arcs. American Idiot sold 6 million copies in the United States and introduced the band to a younger generation. It transformed them from 1990s survivors into a major 2000s rock force. The success of American Idiot proved Green Day could grow without abandoning their core instincts. The songs still had urgency, but the scale was larger. They were writing about national mood, not just personal frustration. The album's impact also reached beyond the record itself. In 2010, American Idiot was adapted into a Broadway musical. That move would have seemed almost impossible to imagine for a band that came out of punk clubs and independent labels. The stage adaptation was nominated for 3 Tony Awards: Best Musical, Best Scenic Design, and Best Lighting Design. It won the latter too. This was a strange and revealing full-circle moment. Punk alienation had become theatrical art without losing its emotional bite. Green Day followed American Idiot with 21st Century Breakdown in 2009, another ambitious album that continued their interest in large themes and dramatic structure. It won the Grammy Award for Best Rock Album, reinforcing that Green Day's second act was not a fluke. But the next era proved more complicated. In 2012, the band released a trilogy, Uno y Dos, and Tres, arriving in September, November, and December. The idea was huge, but the commercial results were lower than expected compared with their previous albums. A lack of promotion hurt the project, and Billie Joe Armstrong entering rehab during that period shifted attention away from the music. It was a reminder that even a giant band can face very human limits. The band continued forward with Revolution Radio in 2016, which became their third album to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200. That achievement mattered because it showed Green Day still had a large, active audience decades after their first wave of fame. Later came Father of All Motherfuckers in 2020 and Saviors in 2024, continuing a career that had already passed through underground punk, mainstream explosion, political rock opera, Broadway adaptation, and legacy band status. Few rock groups managed to remain both recognizable and adaptable for that long. Green Day's endurance comes from a balance. They can change the framing, scale, and production around their music, but their songs still often begin with direct emotion and sharp hooks. Green Day's legacy is measured in numbers, but also in influence. As of 2024, they have sold roughly 75 million records worldwide. They have received 20 Grammy nominations and won 5, including Best Alternative Album for Dookie, Best Rock Album for American Idiot and 21st Century Breakdown, Record of the Year for Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and Best Musical Show Album for American Idiot, the original Broadway cast recording. In 2015, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in their first year of eligibility. That honor confirmed what their career had already demonstrated. Green Day made punk accessible without making it harmless. They turned frustration into songs millions could sing, and in doing so, helped redefine modern rock. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.